Hello, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to the final author interview for the month of September. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining me today is a guest I am super excited to have on the show. Now, my guest today is an autistic author who published his first novel in 2011 and since then has published approximately 25 more books. His writing branches into other forms, from soaring poetry to dry reviews of technologies, and has been featured in various publications locally and internationally to varying receptions. And I'm so excited to have this guest on my show, viewers list, because this incredible author has probably been my most frequent commenter on a majority of all of my videos. And I'm so excited to have him here. And he currently holds the record now of the first commenter from my channel, now making his official debut here on the show. And to tell us all about his journey as an author and how he crafts the written word, let's give a huge round of applause to a very special guest, Mr. Silas Jackson. Silas, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation.
Awesome, Silas. Awesome. So before we dive into your background as an author and some of the stories that you've written, is there anything you would like to share with the viewers and listeners? Possibly a fun fact about you?
Fun fact. Well, speaking of comments on YouTube, like part of the reason for that is I'm also a creator on YouTube, so I know like what goes into these things, and I know how nice it is to get that engagement. So that's part of the reason.
Awesome. Awesome. And that's something we're also going to be talking about when we get to the business side of being an author. As I just explained, being a fellow content creator and telling incredible stories. And speaking of stories, Silas, what are some of the books you have worked on in your career?
Most recently, there's so many different ones. Like you said, there's like 25. Most recently, it's a sci-fi story called The Spot. That's one of the newest ones. That might actually be the newest one published. And there's before that, there was like a ironically cozy spy versus spy, like mock dark comedy take on like the Hallmark romantic comedy kind of vibe, like the dark version of that, called Beyond the Buoy.
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice. And we're going to be touching on those in a very little bit, viewers and listeners. But before we get to those stories, as well as an overview of Silas's career, let's start at the very beginning, Silas. So, what would you consider to be the starting point, your aha moment that really put you on the path of being a storyteller and author?
It's hard to answer that because I don't really remember a time where I didn't write, like where I wasn't a storyteller. It's like I was born and just started doing it. I didn't decide to start doing it in the same way I didn't decide to like start eating or something. That was just a thing that I started doing automatically, and
Awesome.
writing was the thing.
Nice. Very, very nice. So pretty much a common answer I've gone with all of my guests for this one is that writing has been ingrained in their DNA from the beginning. So let's go a little bit further. At what point did you decide to become an author, to take your passion for writing and make a career from it, to build something from it?
I think in terms of putting it out there, like trying to get a following and stuff, and like whatever that means. That would have been like 15 years ago, ish. Like when I published my first book, like that was the impetus behind publishing it was like I want to reach more people. Like I don't want to just like hand this to a few people. I want to be able to reach more broadly with this.
All right, nice. And from that point, now we go into the creation of these stories. So let's start at the very beginning of that point. So for you, Silas, whenever you are working on a new idea for a potential story, do you begin with a rough outline? Are you more of like a planner? Or are you more so of an author who writes by the seat of the pants, a pantser?
I think I'd say more of a planner. Like I have a pretty clear vision of what the book is going to be overall before I even start writing the beginning of it. Like before I write sentence one, like I know what the ending is usually, at least in vague terms.
Nice. All right. And then from that point, when you finally have the idea, the skeleton of the story, do you have a ritual or routine that keeps you centered and focused in the sense of if you want to publish this book, let's say the end of a certain month, what keeps you disciplined and centered when working on a project?
Um, Fixation on it, like again, like you said, my intro, like I'm autistic. I think the part of it, not to make a joke of it, I guess, but part of it is like fixating on this thing and focusing on
Mhm.
it so hard, like, and just finishing it because I couldn't not finish it. Like I couldn't start writing this thing and be invested in a story and characters and an idea and not do it. So it's like,
Very true.
yeah, yeah, like
That is
so,
awesome.
yeah, like I wouldn't necessarily say like I'm even. I mean, there is discipline to it. Like it is, you develop the discipline to stick with this thing over time. But at the same time, like it's just instinctual. Like I'm just fixated on it and disciplined to finish it because I automatically am.
That is true. That's everything for every author. When we have a good story, we want to finish it. We want to get it done as quickly as we can. Of course, life does happen. Sometimes that's out of our control. But if we're very passionate about the story that we have begun to create, we can't see ourselves doing anything else but write this story. And
Yeah.
ultimately, from that point onward, when you're in the zone, writing the story, getting at least a rough draft version, what ultimately is your goal as the author when you're at that point, that headspace? And ultimately, what is the promise you're making to your readers, from fans who have been with you from your first book to new fans who will pick up this book as their first introduction into your style of writing?
Hmm. It's a good question. Like, what is the promise of like the spot, for example? Like, what is the promise of it? I think the promise is the same thing that every story promises to be interesting and engaging in some way. Like the what makes somebody pick up a book in the first place and start reading it. It's like some interest, like something about it, the concept of it, or the cover art, or whatever. Like grab their interest, and the promise of the story is to hold that interest, like to be whatever they thought it was. And the I mean, hopefully, like anything I write, hopefully would have some deeper meaning below that. Like it's not just popcorn entertainment. But at the same time, the the delivery system of that meaning to the reader, like if there's going to be a
Mhm.
line in there that they quote themselves for years to come, or like if a character was like a catalyst to think about something a new way or whatever, um, the delivery system of that to them is going to be that it was interesting to read it. Like that they're not going to slog through this thing to get to meaning eventually. They're going to read it because it's interesting. So I think that's what the promise it makes, just by virtue of being a story. Like the promise it makes is that this is going to be an interesting story. This is going to engage you in some way. You're going to find this compelling or cathartic or whatever it may be.
Very
Yeah.
true. That is very, very true. I think that's true for all authors, that at the end of the day, we want our stories to leave that imprint in our readers that they can reference a line from the book or a scene from the book. And as our first fan question of the interview, one of my viewers asks, when you began writing and publishing your first book back in 2011, what really surprised you about the publishing industry at that point in your journey?
Um, so it has changed a lot over the years, but I think at that point I was surprised by how accessible it was. And even at that time, like it's way more accessible now. But even at that time, I was like, oh wow, I can just write a thing and then publish it. Like that's amazing. Like what a magical thing that is.
Ultimately, yeah, that is very, very true. I have to agree. And actually, funny enough, I had a guest just recently who mentioned something similar of, you know, at the time when she began writing, she never realized that as authors, she's traditionally published, but she self-published her first book. She never knew people could do that. She never knew that was a
Yeah.
thing. And ultimately she did it. And that was a huge stepping stone in her career. And the topic of the publishing industry and what we could have done better in our careers is something that we're going to be touching on later in the interview. And as another fun fan question I love asking my guests, now for you, Silas, when you create characters in your various stories, what has been your favorite character to write about as well as scene? Follow that by the most challenging character to write and the most difficult scene to bring to page.
Um, this is very like inside baseball because people wouldn't know what I mean necessarily, like what character I mean. But I think probably this is like an archetype I keep coming back to for whatever reason. I don't know why, but like someone who was created in some way. Like usually it's a sci-fi thing. It's like genetic engineering or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever the storytelling gimmick is. But usually the archetype is like the created person, like trying to find themselves rather than what they were created to be. So I think that's like that would be my, at least in terms of like an archetype I keep coming back to. I think that would be my favorite to do. Um, and for the most challenging, the most difficult, it would be like probably like someone really extroverted and talkative because I'm not that. Like I need to write the opposite of myself and like think
Mm.
rather than thinking, like, what would I do? What would I say? Like, how would I feel in this situation? I think like, what would a completely different person do? Like, what would I not say here? Like, what's the opposite of my instinct?
True, very, very true. And I like how you brought up that archetype character of like this engineered being really trying to find their place. I like characters like that as well. They're kind of like the Pinocchio in their own story where they're trying to figure out their place in, very impressionable. And the topic of archetypes, characters, and tropes in literature and fiction is something we're also going to be touching on when we get into the business side of being an author. Now,
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't talk about probably the biggest thing, and that is, of course, the dreaded writer's block. We all have it in some shape or form. Some have it more than others, some experience it fewer times. For you, Silas, how do you deal with the writer's block if you ever encountered or had it in your own journey?
Um, so I think I kind of hack it a little bit. Like it's the. So when I think writer's block, I think like you're writing a scene, you're increasing your word count, and then you hit a block. You can't increase your word count anymore. But at that point, I just develop more ideas and think about the outline of the story, or like work on it in a different way. And usually I don't. I find that I'm not blocked in every way. Like even if I'm blocked in one way and I can't work on it for whatever reason, like I'm tired or just distracted or whatever, and can't sit there and like write words on the page. I can still be thinking about the story in a broader sense, of thinking about the themes I'm trying to express through this story, through these characters. So I think writer's block is less a thing that actually stops me from working on a story, and more a thing that I have to find a way around it. And that actually is helpful sometimes. Like it might shake me out of like doing the same thing, or like striking my head against the wall and like trying to get the story finished as I envision it right now. I might think about it longer and harder and have like a new idea and do something different that I wasn't going to do before. So it's like the writer's block actually. I don't think it's a bad thing always. I think it's like sometimes it is okay, take your time, think about this more, and have the idea that you haven't had yet. Like just trust that that idea is coming, and you're thinking about it in behind the scenes, like subconsciously. It might be a dream you're gonna have like tomorrow or whatever, or like something you haven't really thought of yet, but you're going to.
Yes, very, very true. And kind of another very personalized question is, as I'm sure you'll definitely agree, you know, as an author and as also a content creator, it is a very lonely venture, at least in the beginning. And as
Yeah.
authors, we find ourselves at points in our lives of when do we let people know we're working on this or the next book in our series. I've had guests on the show who have said from the get-go, they told their friends and family what they were working on, while others have said they told them when their book was published or when it was on sale for a few weeks, if not a month to a year. For you, Silas, at what point in your journey did you tell your friends and family that you were embarking on this journey of yours back in 2011?
I think for me it was so gradual and organic that I really never did, because it was just I wrote stuff and people saw me writing things. Like people already knew I did this all the time. And then I just started publishing things, and people already knew that I write. So there wasn't really anything to tell them about. It was like people are already very aware that I do this. Like I write stuff almost constantly. So then yeah, like when I started publishing it, there was never really a point where I needed to tell anyone. Like they already saw me doing it. Like they already saw me writing things, and then they saw me deciding to publish it, and they saw me working on the thing that I was going to publish. And so, yeah, it was like there wasn't really a point to at which I told anybody, because it was such a gradual thing.
That's awesome. That's awesome that you've had this really supportive community and family that always knew from the get go what you were going to do. And were just eagerly awaiting the story that you had in your mind, wanting to come from the, what was the word one person said, the pool of stories down onto the page. And this goes into another discussion, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on. And that is, of course, what it means to be an author of the digital age. Because, as I'm sure you'll definitely agree, the industry has changed within the last 20 years, if not the last 15 years, 10 years. And it
Yeah, maybe the
seems,
past couple years.
yeah, that is true. That is very, very true. And that tying it into the notion of social media, you could not think of like the last maybe 25 years or so where authors were thinking like, building an author's website, or even when the internet was available and things like Facebook or MySpace or anything like that was an integral aspect of marketing one's book and building an online presence. But now, 25 years later, it seems absolutely impossible to be an author and not have some form of digital presence on any social media platform, or for you and me and many more, having a content page on YouTube where we showcase our talent and our expertise. And with social media and everything, it is a very draining toil because, well, on one end, we're able to connect and build networking with other authors and other people in the industry. We do leave ourselves open to the negative side of social media. And a lot of guests have agreed that social media only heightens our anxieties about being authors as well as our imposter syndrome of being authors. So, for you, Silas, I would like to hear your thoughts on this discussion of how have you been able to stay disciplined as an author while also realizing the uses and benefits as well as the drawbacks of having an online presence as an author, despite the benefits it does have.
Yeah, I think well, part of it for me, like part of it is good luck, I guess. So like the fact that I'm not very big yet, like I don't have such a big reach that I have a lot of just random people seeing stuff and responding to things negatively. Like the people that I do reach are kind of this self-selected group of people that either I
Mm,
know them on some level or they read something else from me and they liked it, so they seek out this new thing. So it's like a self-selected group of people that are primed to like this stuff. Um, and I think on the flip side of that, if you do have a lot of random trolls and like people that respond badly, that's a function of having more reach. Like if you reach more people, you're gonna have more of the wrong sort of people. So
mhm.
I guess that would be the discipline as part of it, like intellectually knowing like this is kind of a good thing. Like if I have trolls like commenting on a YouTube video or whatever, for example, that means more people saw it. Like it was served to more people. Like intellectually, it was. I know it had more reach. It had more traction. Like it got more people engaging with it. If it also reached that random guy who said he didn't like it or whatever. So same thing with books, I think. Like the more reach it has, if you get negative responses to it from just random people you've never heard of, then that's kind of a good thing. Like it means it reached a whole lot of people. Like for that one negative comment, you probably reached like 1,000 people. So
That is
yeah,
true.
yeah, I think that's the discipline aspect of it. Like just knowing intellectually knowing that's true, reminding yourself of that. So it is. Like if you only get one comment and that one comment is negative, that can be very emotionally draining. So
Hmm.
then
That is
you
very
need this
true.
yeah, then you need the awareness of like, well, that one guy, that one person that negatively responded, that means 999 people thought it, and maybe probably a bunch of them liked it. They just maybe didn't say anything.
Very true. And on the topic of reviews, what have been the overall reviews for your stories from Bayou to many more Spot? Have they been positive, very critical, or somewhere down the middle?
For the most part, they've been positive. Like a lot of, like, I've just been lucky, I guess, that way. Like I've just had a lot of positive, supportive people reading these things, even random strangers on the internet. Like I was saying, that there's a selective pressure right now because I don't have a huge reach. So there is a selective pressure of people that want
Mm,
this stuff. Like they're seeking it out. They searched for something I wrote or the topic of it. Like they found that interesting and they searched for it. So I'm getting more positive people in my pool of like people I'm reaching. And that's been reflected in like the reviews and comments on things. Like they're generally pretty nice.
That's awesome. That is really, really good. Now we get into probably one of my favorite questions of this segment of the interview, and it's a debate question, an opinion question. So, context for this, Silas, as I'm sure you probably have heard on my other interviews about this part, is that I've been doing the show now on Spotify, YouTube together for the last 6, 7 years, and I've had the opportunity to meet so many incredible authors, hybrid, traditional, indie, aspiring, debuting, and many, many more. And from what I've learned from talking to all of them, is generally speaking, we all began our writing careers professionally within the last 5 years during the lockdown era. And a lot
Yeah,
of authors have agreed that the lockdown era became a breeding ground for new voices in the industry. And once the floodgates opened, it took the industry by storm. And that was a good thing. But now, 5 years in, I've now had a better time to reflect. And a lot of other guests have said that the market has become too saturated. And we're now moving away from a golden age and entering what I like to call an iron age or new age. So, Silas, in your opinion, from your own experiences, do you feel that we are possibly still in a golden age, or are we leading towards more so of an iron age? And to add more clarity to this one, as authors, this is not a get rich quick scheme, but many people who did write stories during the lockdown period had that mentality. Unfortunately, that's not the case. This is not an industry to get rich quick. And this boils down to two paths: to be an author and to be known as an author. So, tying back into the question, I would like to hear your thoughts on this debate of, are we in a golden age or more so of an iron age?
I think probably not either, really. Like we were
Okay.
saying before, that it's more accessible and easier for anyone to publish anything. So
Mm-hmm.
that's part of why we have like this market saturation of just whatever, because anyone can publish anything at any time. So of course we have all kinds of stuff. Um, but I think in terms of not being golden age right now or not an iron age or whatever. Um, that's because there never is golden age. There never is an iron age. Like you can, even if we're talking about actual gold or actual iron, like if you look back at the historical period and say like, oh, this was the Iron Age, people weren't all using iron in that age. Like there are all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of people all over the world using all kinds of material. Um, so it's a simplification in hindsight to say like what filtered down to us in the present is that most people were using iron. So but if you were actually living in that age and looked around at all the humans on Earth, you'd see all kinds of people doing all kinds of different things with stone and leather and whatever. Um, in the same way of writing, like we're in this age seeing all kinds of stuff. So we might think like, oh, there's more worse stuff now than there was 100 years ago or something. But 100 years have passed, and only the good, enduring, resonant classic stuff has filtered down to us. So that's why we can look back and think like, oh, that was the golden age of writing.
Mm.
And same thing for like 10 years ago or 1 year ago or whatever. We always have more context about what everybody's doing in the present and less information about what people were doing in the past. And that what we're seeing about what people were doing is the best, most iconic, most memorable stuff. Like that's what passes down to us. So now, so yeah, like I don't think we're in a golden age. I don't think we're in an iron age. I think there's just we're in an age of more stuff that we're seeing.
That is true. So I guess you would also agree with this statement that for indie authors, it's never been more easier to get published, but it's also never been more difficult to get noticed.
Yeah, say that. Like there's so much stuff up there. There's so many things someone could potentially read or look at or watch. Like we're talking about videos. So it is very difficult to break through that, like to actually get traction with any given thing because there's just so many competing things for anyone's attention all the time.
Yes, very, very true. And then, of course, another thing I do want to hear your thoughts on, which I love asking my guests, is the role and the implementation of AI in the publishing industry. I've talked with a lot of editors, a lot of narrators, especially a lot of authors on this question, because I think this is a very important question to bring about because it is now in all of our lives as authors. And a lot of
Yeah.
books, as we talked about, saturation of AI in the industry and how it does take away from the human voice, human element of authors, where AI can be useful for the publishing industry in terms of, refining book synopsis, the outlines, making them crisp, or if you have a story but don't have an outline, you can use that and refine it. But I'd just like to hear your thoughts on this, Silas. And do you think, in your opinion, it is as bad as people are making it out to be?
No, I mean it's a tool. It works like any tool works. It follows the logic of a tool. Like because pick up like a hammer or whatever and say like what can you do with a hammer? Like what do people do with hammers? Like you can't answer that. Like so many different people use hammers in different ways for different things. So it's like AI is a new enough technological advancement that we kind of clump everything together into
Mm-hmm.
AI generated art or AI generated text or whatever. And the more familiar we are with it, the more we see the nuance in like how people use this tool and the different things they're doing with it and like the way it can be integrated with different approaches. So I think that saying like it's as bad as people say or good as people say or whatever, like that's either direction. That's a simplification. It's a tool. It's not good or bad. It's who's using it, how are they using it, what are they using it for? Like that's a bunch of questions, and it's not easy to answer that.
Well said, Silas. So now we go into the business side of being an author. As an icebreaker question for this segment of the interview, so from 2011 to now, what really surprised you about the publishing industry in that aspect of marketing one's books? And then, of course, ultimately, looking back on your journey, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of promoting your previous work?
I think looking back, if I could do something differently, I'd probably start a YouTube channel earlier than I did. Um, but in terms of like what's changed over the years, like what's the most obvious thing that's changed is that it's much cheaper now than it used to be. Like the
Mm,
literal sense, like in the business nuts and bolts part of it, like the you just had to pay a lot more to publish a soft cover book in 10 years ago than you do now. Like the I think you'd probably call like what I did with my original 2 or 3 books hybrid publishing. It was like working with a
mm.
publishing partner. That's what you could do at the time. Like that was the only option. If you wanted to get a physical book, you had to pay someone who had a printer to print it, and that's just not the case anymore. So it's much more. I think what's changed most notably for me is it's just so much cheaper and easier to do it now, to publish something, to release all different formats like an ebook, audiobook, physical book. You can just effortlessly do that without any investment. It was hundreds of dollars before.
Yes, ultimately that I 100% agree. Especially as indie authors, it's never been more easier, again, to the statement that it's never been more easier to promote or publish one's book as either an ebook, uh, Audible, paperback, hardback, what have you. But
Yeah,
especially in the business side, it is very challenging to get noticed and to really showcase who we are because the market is so saturated. So for you, Silas, another big thing to talk about is, of course, understanding one's audience. Because when we write, we are the target audience. But when we promote it and publish it, we have to think of A, what's the genre we're writing for? B, how large is the audience it's in genre? And C, does our story really market towards them or readers more so like us? And that's another thing too, is understanding the readership, whether it's YA, middle grade, new adult, or adult fiction. They have their own expectations. So for you, Silas, are you more of an author that writes to the market audience of the genre or more so of the readership? And do you have a good idea of who your audience is from your books?
yeah, I do have a solid idea of like who my reader is, like the theoretical like ideal reader. Like I have that in mind. Um, but I think in terms of writing for myself versus writing for an audience, like I probably do both at the same time because like I don't think my own like what appeals to me, I don't think that's so different and so unique that it isn't also going to appeal to other people. Like I am, I'm in terms of like movies or like big IPs like Jurassic Park or whatever. Like I know people like
Mhm.
that, and I like that. And there are other things like Star Trek and Star Wars or whatever, like things that I like and I know other people like. So it's not. I don't think it's one or the other. Like you can write something that you find appealing and resonant and like speaks to you on a deep level, and also have a trust that that's going to speak to other people. Like if you find something appealing, then it's also going to appeal to other people probably because what is what's appealing to you except stuff that's resonant with like some human truth. And what are your readers like? They're humans who know the human truths. They're going to find the same thing resonant and meaningful. So yeah, I think it's both things at once. Like it's writing for yourself and for your audience.
Beautifully said, Silas. Beautifully said. And now, talking about being a content creator, let's talk a little bit about that. So, when did you begin your YouTube career, and how did you decide what kind of content you want to showcase? I had a chance to look at your videos, and I have to say, very well done, very well made.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think it was like 2.5 years ago, something like that, that I started creating videos. Um, and it was the idea of it has always been like build an audience, build a platform that I can then leverage to like promote other things. I can promote if I have an audience of like whatever number of people watch my videos, if I get like 10,000 views on stuff, whatever, like if I build that kind of platform, then that can be turned to the use of publicizing and like marketing whatever I make forever. It's like free advertising. Like I would pay hundreds of dollars for that kind of reach. Um, so that is part of the idea is like build that platform and have it to use. And also it's just watching videos and like just feeling inspired by this kind of content I liked. Like the main thing I do on that channel is you've probably seen like if you look at the channel, it's RPG actual play stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Like I just watch a bunch of creators who do that kind of stuff. And even down to the format, like my stuff is more audio. centric because I don't. Ironically, I'm on camera right now, but I usually don't like to be on camera. Um, and I just started listening to audio actual plays, and I was like, "Huh,
Ah,
you can do that." And I just started doing that.
nice. That's very, very nice. So now moving ahead, which I think is also important to talk about, as an author, how do you craft each world, each setting to feel authentic and yet gripping that really pulls the reader in? Because the characters are important, but characters are only as good as the world they belong to. And if the world's not engaging, doesn't matter about the characters or the archetypes or the tropes. Well, depending on the individual, but generally speaking, the atmosphere, the setting, the world building has to be good, if not better, than the characters.
Yeah, I think well, it's a big topic. Like how to world build well is like we could talk about that for hours. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think 20,000 foot view of it, the main takeaway is like it doesn't have to be extremely exhaustively detailed. It needs to be meaningful and evocative. So what I mean is the more appealing thing to do is always going to be lead the reader to imagine something, like imagine what they would find interesting or appealing, or like what invites them to question, like how does the school system work in this world, or like how does this magic system apply to medicine or whatever. um it's always they're always going to imagine something more interesting and more gripping than what you say. So I think in terms of world building, to make it gripping and evocative, it's always better to lead the reader to a gap and have them imagine something interesting than it is to just shoehorn something in. So I think
Mm.
that's, in terms of like creating different worlds for different stories, I think that's always, or most of the time, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the way I try to do it. Like make
Very
it,
well said, Silas. So from that point, let's also talk back about probably one of my favorite things about this side of being an author, the business side, and that's of course we talked a little bit about marketing and networking, and we hinted a little bit about networking and finding our tribe, our circle. But I now offer you the floor, Silas, to give shout outs to any particular author or groups of writers who have helped you on your journey, of course, friends and family.
yeah, friends and family, obviously. And Julian Tross, like I said to you before, he's a co-author with me on a lot of things, not on everything, but on a handful of this. Even on my first book, I think, yeah, my first published book, he was a co-author on that. Um, so obviously I have to shout out him, and his series is really good
Nice.
by his series. Um, and yeah, I've had various writing teachers, big influences, like maybe not formal teachers over the years. And I think that is too many to shout out specifically by name. But I think that is like you were saying before, that being a writer is like a very introspective, lonely, isolated thing. And I think every writer, like if they're gonna improve their craft of writing, they're gonna have a tribe of people. Like they're gonna have different perspectives that influence them, different ideas that come in from outside. So yeah, in terms of shouting out people, like there, I think there are too many to specifically say their names. Like, but there definitely have been a lot over the years. Like has been a lot of influence from other people.
Awesome. And before we get to the final questions of this amazing interview, Silas, here is another fan question, which is actually an old question that one of my viewers has tweaked a little bit. They ask, if you had to be part of a panel, either a lineup or hosting a workshop class, what is the one topic or one aspect of the writer's journey that you would love to showcase or teach fellow authors?
Um, Again, that's like a very big topic. Is like how would you write well? Like that's a thing people spend years and years developing that craft. But I think the big thing for me, especially like over the years that I've noticed in my own writing, is like being flowery in language and like being deliberately obtuse and like hard to parse, like not having that simplicity and that directness. Don't do that. Like that's a very amateurish thing to be like deliberately hard to follow. Um and yeah, just value brevity and simplicity, and like if you can say something in one word instead of 10, like do it. Don't have that innate view in the back of your mind of like the more words I use, the better. Like the harder it is to diagram this sentence, like the better it is. That's not true. I definitely thought that as a brand new writer, and over the course of years, like learned, no, that's not true. That's the opposite of true. That's not how language works.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that would be what I wanted to teach a workshop on, if anything.
Nice, very nice, Silas. And now we arrived at the final two questions of this amazing author interview. And here they are, Silas. The first one is, looking back on your career and looking ahead down the road, what do you want readers to take away from your style of storytelling? And secondly, and rather ultimately, to all the authors and writers and fellow content creators listening to this interview or watching it on their tablet, phone, or what have you, what is your word of wisdom to them?
So the word of wisdom first. Um, Kind of connects back to what we we're talking about at the beginning. Like don't forget entertainment value. Like is equally important to meaning, to substance of whatever you're doing. Like that having substance really is important, but it's not gonna reach anybody without being engaging and interesting and entertaining and holding their attention. So that don't fall into that trap of thinking like if something is fun and entertaining, like it can't be meaningful, or if something is going to be meaningful, that's more important than the entertainment of it. You have to do both things, like as a creator, as a writer, like as you're creating anything. um it has to grip people on a entertainment level, like a visceral, like, oh, that's interesting, I want to see that or read that, and also deliver the meaning that you want it to deliver. It needs to do both of those things at once, and that's not easy to do. Like the same as I was saying before, like it's if it was easy and simple, like people wouldn't spend their lifetime like developing the ability to do it. And if someone could just say it, like, oh yeah, do it this way, then everybody would do it that way. Like you wouldn't need to build up to it for like 10 years or whatever. Um, so yeah, I think that's if I had to deliver like one word of wisdom to content creators and writers, it would be like, don't underestimate fun and like the
Mhm.
interesting, quirky, like entertaining value of something. Like that's a meaningful contribution to the thing. Like that's going to deliver the deeper meaning of it to a reader. Um, and I think for what I want readers to take away, like it's the flip side of that. It's like the deeper meaning. Like I want to write things that are fun, like that I always talk to Jolene about this and other people, like the the B movie aesthetic. Like that's what I tried to achieve, like that fun, like over the top, ridiculous kind of quality of the story. Like usually I'm going for that. Um, but also I wanted to have a deeper meaning below that. So like some kind of human truth that it speaks to beyond just porn entertainment. So that's what I hope that a reader takes away. Like they read this thing and they're like, "Oh, that was fun. Like what a romp that was." But then there's also something they quote like 5 years later that reminds them of something like in their own life, or like gives them a different perspective. Or like there was a character that was a catalyst to think about something in a way that they hadn't previously thought about. So that's what I hope to give like through this story.
Excellent, Silas. Excellent. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude the final author interview for the month of September. I want to give a huge thank you to our guest, Silas Jackson, for coming on the show. Now, Silas, where can people reach you if they want to connect with you on social media? And do you have any upcoming announcements you'd like to make? Any books in the works? Any episodes on your YouTube channel that'll be dropping soon? Anything like that?
Um, so people can find me by on YouTube, obviously. Like they can just either search for Virtual Muse and find me that way, or maybe just like click a link somewhere. Like if one of us remembers to include a link, we'll put that in. Um, and as for new books coming, like there's the series I'm working on right now is a sci-fi series. It's kind of like a love letter to Jurassic Park because that was a big
Ooh.
influence me, like a big inspiration. At one point, I knew the entire script by heart, like I'd watched it so many times. Um, and the on my YouTube channel, there's a video that's like a fake cinematic trailer of that series. So if you are interested in the concept of like a over the top B movie Jurassic Park, but also more meaningful, um, you can watch that little trailer and it'll give you a sense of what it is.
Nice. And also, before I do forget, where can people buy copies of your previous works if they want to check out your stories?
Um, so there are some on that you can get through Amazon, and there's my much older ones are like on a. I'm not even sure if the website exists anymore. It's called Buy Books on the Web. That's a few of my older books are on there. But definitely go to Amazon and get my more recent stuff. Like that's better. Um, I think we already said that some titles before earlier in the interview, like Beyond the Buoy is one,
Mhm.
and The Spot is one. So if you search for those, that'll be your gateway into like related stuff.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. Thank you again for joining us for an incredible month of September here on the show, viewers and listeners. A huge thank you to our guest, Silas Jackson. We wish him the very best in his career as a fellow indie author as well as a fellow content creator. Silas, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it. And viewers and listeners, thank you again for your love and support. I'll be dropping the final episode of the September book review over the weekend. So that way it'll be ready for you to listen and learn more about that book and the author, Jasmine Young. And until next time, viewers and listeners, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in October.